And so I enter into evidence why I believe that Peter fits into the Betty, James and Augustine love triangle. Honestly, I have went to so much effort for my look today, but simultaneously no effort at all. Will I spend half an hour doing my makeup? Yes. Will I change into a more appropriate bra? Absolutely not. Will I wear a super cute folklore themed dress? Yes. Will I take my bright pink leggings off and my Barbie slippers off? No. This video actually came about from a Reddit post that I made where I said how I felt like Peter was the most underrated and underappreciated song on the whole album when it actually is some of her best writing. I think maybe as well because there are so many songs to consume with Tortured Poets Department and then the Anthology as well. Maybe people just haven't had enough time to like fully comprehend all the songs and their greatness. And for me, I feel like Peter is one of those songs that I don't hear mentioned that often, and I feel like it's really slept on, and I feel like that's a legal activity because it's fucking great. It is actually one of the best songs on the entire album, and I mean like the two sections of the album. It's so good, it's so heart-wrenching, it's fucking beautiful. And after that Reddit post, I was like, hey, I have more to talk about. I need to make a video on this. So before moving on to why I feel that Peter fits into the Betty, James and Augustine love triangle, let's talk about Peter for a minute because I have some things to say. Reasons that I love this song are, first of all, one, the theme. Obviously Taylor is referencing Peter Pan in this theme, which I know has been done time and time and time again. And I actually seen somebody saying that they are like over people using the Peter Pan references and they find it quite annoying, which I just do not feel the same. Like, I think it's like a great reference to make, and I think just because something is used a lot doesn't mean that it's overused, especially when it's done in very different ways. I think that using Peter Pan to draw similarities to someone who you knew from your past who never quite grew up is so relatable, because I feel like most people, probably most women, like know somebody like that from their past, that they've kind of grown up and matured, but this man that they know just hasn't. Some men just have a little bit of Peter Pan syndrome and they literally never leave their "I'm just a boy" phase. And for me, when I think of this song, it's not even a romantic relationship that I connect it to in my personal life. And I always think it's really great when a song is written in such a way that you can tie it to something that you relate to. And I love the fact that I can relate this song to somebody from my past who feels a little bit like I was forever waiting for to change. I was given chance and chance and chance and chance and chance to, and they just kept themselves being immature and selfish like a little boy, even as they started to grow up. People in that Reddit thread were saying how it reminds them of their brother, it reminds them of childhood friends who they were like, oh, we'll always be best friends forever, won't we? But then ultimately a lot of people never really stick to that promise as you begin to grow older and drift apart. Some people were saying that it reminded them of romantic relationships. One person even said that they just separated from someone, but it was almost like a just for now separation, while they kind of go and do their separate things and go to uni or whatever and get their own shit in their own lives together, but with the hope that they will one day reunite and come back together. And they were saying how they listen to this song and think about, they just know that they're going to be listening to this song however many years down the line and know that they can relate to that, and that's really sad. Another reason I love this song is the piano. It is honestly just so beautiful. I also love how it's so stripped back in terms of production as well. It makes it feel really raw and authentic and vulnerable. I feel like this song, it's kind of like you can imagine that Taylor or the narrator of the song has just came to this like massive realization that this person is never going to be the person that they need them to be, and that they need to let them go, and they just kind of sadly sit down at their piano and start playing and just come out with this like stream of conscious thought. How I kind of think about it is we're right at the end of the song where she says the woman who sits by the window has turned out the light. I think about it as she turns out the light, she then goes in, maybe gets herself a fucking whiskey because she needs it, and just starts playing this on the piano, and it just flows out so naturally because I think it feels so raw. That's just what I picture. I also think lyrically the song is so good in the way that it seems to go through so many stages. It's almost like there's these phases of like bittersweet nostalgia, wondering what this person is up to, maybe even a little bit of hope, and then there's guilt in there, there's hopelessness, and then the eventual kind of realization that this is it. There's also some anger in there as well, I feel. So let's try and break down some of the lyrics. I'm not going to super deep dive into them, I'm just going to try and get through this like nice and quickly. So she opens with, "Forgive me, Peter, my lost fearless leader, in closets like cedar, preserved from when we were just kids. Is it something I did?" And right away, she's right in the game to break my fucking heart here, because holy shit, the first time that I heard this, I was like, oh, so you're actually trying to murder me, that's what's going on here. I feel like opening up with the line, "Forgive me, Peter," is so deeply fucked up, because immediately she's feeling this guilt for moving on with her life and moving on from him. It's like her and this person have obviously promised to each other that they will rekindle one day and they will get back together one day, and that she just needs to keep up a little bit of hope for that. But right here, she's feeling this realization that she can't do that, because if she waits for him, she will wait forever. But along with that comes a lot of guilt, because that's still a betrayal in her eyes. Like, it's a betrayal to Peter, and it's a betrayal to her younger self as well, who actually kept that promise. The line as well, "preserved from when we were just kids," almost gives off to me like her memories are also preserved, and maybe in a way she's preserved, and she feels like she's in this kind of frozen time warp state where she's keeping herself like holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore, and from the vibe I get from the song, hasn't existed for a really, really long time. Hi, editing me. I put my finger here to strategically cover up this spot, but not so strategically if I literally show it to you. I just wanted to hop on and be like, somebody on Reddit was like said something so fucking concerning to me that like when I was like rewatching like myself saying this, I was like, holy shit, because this person was like, in my head, it's either they says it's not Betty or Betty is also this person. They said that it's the same Peter is the later version of Right Where You Left Me, and it's just like this is the point where they're like, they kind of almost like snap out of it, and they're like and like they realise like years has passed and they've just like clung to this person, and I'm like, literally, why would you say that to me? Like, what would actually give you the audacity and the right to say that to me? Go to hell. Go. Do not pass go. Go straight to hell. Like, in her waiting for him, she has kept herself preserved as she once was, and she hasn't really fully let herself move on from those memories and move on from this person, because how could she? She's made the promise that she will wait for him. And then the "is it something I did" is particularly gut-wrenching to me. Why do I actually feel like I'm going to cry talking about this? That's insane. This song honestly just like fucks me up on so many levels. I actually feel like I'm going to cry. Last night when I was writing my notes down for this song, I actually like could also feel my eyes watering. Honestly, it just like really, really gets me. I mean, Taylor really does know how to tug on the heartstrings. It's just something about that. Was it something I did? It's almost like that gut-wrenching feeling of when somebody doesn't give you closure and somebody promises that they will come back for you, and you kind of pin all your hopes and all your maybe like even like your self-worth on this person coming back, because that's always like the future that you've had planned for yourself. That's always been like your plan, is to be with this person, and then they don't come back for you and you don't get that closure. It's like you naturally start to think, well, it must be me that's the problem. Like, if you've ever been ghosted by someone, holy shit, that's like the worst like thing that anybody could do to someone. Like, if you ever ghost anyone, like, you're actually an awful person. But if you've ever been ghosted, then you'll know that like it gets to a point where like at first like you might be like, fuck this person, like not messaging me back, and you get angry. But then like as time goes on, you start to be like, wait, did I actually like do something wrong? Was it something that I did? Was it me? Am I the problem? And I think there's many different situations like where that could happen. But I just think the way that she sings it and the way that her voice kind of has like this like desperation in it when she's like, is it something I did? It's just so sad. Then the goddess of timing once found us beguiling. She said she was trying. Peter, was she lying? My ribs get the feeling she did. Again, some more absolutely fucked up lyrics here. Like, what the fuck? I just want to say, like, the goddess of timing once found us beguiling. Like, how dare you say that to me? Like, how dare that be a lyric that you put in a song that I can listen to for the rest of my life? Like, I don't even think that you can actually understand what you're doing to me when you put words like that in a song, Taylor. If you're watching, you actually have to just go to prison, because it's the only way. It's so insane that she could have literally just says, we says it was the right person but the wrong time, but instead she says the goddess of timing once found us beguiling. Babe. And I also just want to say that the word beguiling by definition means charming or enchanting, often in a deceptive way, which I feel like means that they were not being deceitful on purpose, but they were both maybe just kidding themselves into believing that this would work out for them one day. They were like deceiving themselves and deceiving each other at the same time. And when she says like the goddess of timing, that kind of gives this impression that this is completely out of their hands. It's a higher power that's making these decisions. It's literally like a goddess that is deciding their fate for them, and it's not really their fault, and they don't really have a part to play in that. Like, they can't help it. They are both just victims to their circumstances, and the circumstances just is that the timing is not right for them. I also think it's so interesting that after she says the goddess of timing said she was trying, she immediately goes, Peter, was she lying? And to me that just gives the image of this like supernatural all-knowing entity is telling her, hey, I'm trying, but she still looks to Peter, this boy, for this confirmation. It's like she's got this like powerful goddess telling her one thing, but her immediate reaction is to still be like, Peter, was she lying? Like, she's like almost like checking in with him because his word is the most superior word to her. And I think that ties in really nicely with when at the beginning she referred to him as her lost fearless leader, which of course is like another tie-in to Peter Pan, because he is the fearless leader of the Lost Boys. And then saying my ribs get the feeling she did is quite possibly the most achy way that she could say I feel it in my bones, and like my ribs get the feeling she did. Like, she's feeling it right in like her ribs, and you can almost, with hearing those lyrics, you can feel exactly what she means, because I'm sure we've all like felt that before. And then the song goes on, and I didn't want to come down, I thought it was just goodbye for now. And I mean, it's clear that she didn't want this to end, and Peter is kind of like coaxed her down by being like, oh, don't worry, it's not forever, it's just goodbye for now, just come on down from the high of this relationship, because like I promise it will work out one day. And that's kind of like the only way that he could like manage to like persuade her into coming back down into reality. And then she goes on to repeat, you said you were going to grow up, then you were going to come find me, said you were going to grow up, then you were going to come find me, said you were going to grow up, then you were going to come find me. And I think this repetition here is extremely important, because for me it's like, that's the words that she's constantly telling herself as she's waiting all these years. Anytime that she even has the thought of giving up on Peter and moving on with her life, it's almost like she's like, no, you said that you were going to grow up and then you were going to come find me, you said you were going to grow up and then you were going to come find me, you said you were going to grow up and then you were going to come find me. And it's like, these are the words that she holds on to, and this is like almost became like her mantra, the thing that she tells herself over and over and over and over and over again to keep herself like holding on to this relationship. It's like, no, you promised me, you says that you had some growing to do, and once you've become the better version of you and the better man and you're ready for this, you are going to come and find me, you promised it, so it must be real, so I have to just be patient and I have to just wait. But then also I feel like as the song goes on and she starts to realise that she has to let go, I feel like there's like more sadness in that, and it's less like a keeping her anchored in hope. It's almost like a, but like you says that you were going to grow up and then you were going to come and find me, how could you like do this to me? Words from the mouths of babes, promises oceans deep, but never to keep, oh never to keep. I get from this that Peter himself wasn't malicious in his promise. He wasn't just saying it to her to like shut her up and have an easy life. I believe that he was, when he made these promises to her, they were true deep promises. He meant them. He was probably just really naive, maybe even a little bit selfish, probably a little bit selfish, because he was just like a young boy at the time, and maybe he didn't realise like the gravity of his words when he said them, like that he was going to come back for her, he was going to find her again, he meant them, but at the end of the day he just wasn't mature enough to stick to them, and they were just words from the mouths of babes. I'm sure if you had a relationship when you were younger, maybe your first love, you and that person probably told each other a million things and made a million promises to each other and thoroughly believed that no matter what happened in your life and no matter what tore you apart, you would end up back together. Often that doesn't actually end up happening, and like you do end up not being with the person that you were first with. Bikini, don't you dare. But it doesn't mean that the promises at that time were any less true, because you did mean those words when you said them, and I believe that Peter meant those words when he said them. Maisie Peters has a line in one of her songs, I'm pretty sure it's, "You're just a boy and I'm kinda the man," and she says, "You're kinda awful, but you're not awful on purpose," and I feel like Peter's kind of awful but not awful on purpose. Also, she has a song called Wendy that explores similar themes, and that song is really, really great. Actually, Maisie Peters' whole album, The Good Witch, I really, really love it. I think that's possibly like probably was my second most listened to album last year after all of Taylor's albums. Taylor's always like my number one, but I think Maisie Peters was my second artist last year, or potentially it was Sabrina Carpenter, but it was those three at the top. She's great. Are you still a mind reader, a natural scene stealer? I've heard great things, Peter. So the way that this scratches my brain, it's something about the wording of it, something about the way that it flows. Are you still a mind reader, a natural scene stealer? I've heard great things, Peter. It's like something about it my brain just really loves. It feels like, you know, one of those like metal things that have like the big spindly bits on it that you like rub your scalp with. Every time I hear that, that's what it feels like, but on my actual brain. And this part here is, of course, her wondering about Peter now. Are you still this way? Are you still the way that you were when I remember you? Like, are you still that person? Are you still charming? Are you still so much of like so good with people that it's almost like you can read their minds? Are you still the type of person that walks into a room and steals the whole show and all eyes are on you? And it's definitely like that wonder, but then behind it there's like the melancholy of like when you know all these things about a person and then you don't have a relationship with that person and you just have like all this random knowledge of them in your head that is just kind of sticking around there and you don't really know what to do with it anymore. I'm sure if you've had somebody in your life and then you don't speak to them anymore, whether that be a relationship or a friend or a family member, and you maybe knew them so intimately and on such a deep level that you would be able to like accurately describe their personality, like, oh, they're shy or they're super confident, or like this is the way that they would be at a party, but then you don't know them anymore, so you don't know if that still is the person that they are. And it's almost like it's like a really sad line, even though it's one of the lines that is said probably like the most like positively in the song. It actually does hold like a lot of sadness to it. And when she says, I've heard great things, Peter, almost in my head I picture that as maybe like mutual friends or people that they both know, and they're maybe talking about him or being like, hey, you remember Peter from high school? Do you know he's doing X, Y, and Z now? Or I was at a party with him the other day and he was like so funny, you know what he's like. And she's listening to this and everything around her is kind of, she's detaching from it and she's almost in this kind of limbo state where she goes back into like her own memories of Peter. And then there might also even be like a little bit of resentment there because she's holding out waiting for him while he's out doing all these like great things with his life and seems to be not really giving a fuck. And I feel like that resentment shows up a tiny little bit in the next couple of lines where she goes on to say, but life was always easier on you than it was on me. And I think this is because he's so immature that he doesn't feel the gravity of things the way that she does, because she's a lot more emotionally capable than him, because he just kind of floats through life like not worrying too much about anything, because in his head he just has the mentality of a young boy or a child almost, where he thinks about himself and only himself, probably doesn't think further in the future than the next couple of days ahead of him, while she's having to absorb all of the pain that he's causing and all of the hurt that he's left her with and all of these empty promises. Like, she has the capacity to hold all this hurt while he just gets to float through life and not feel any of it. And sometimes it gets me when crossing your jet stream, we both did the best we could do underneath the same moon. in different galaxies. These lines are maybe my favourite in the song, or they're definitely up there. So when crossing your jet stream, to me, is just like, he's like this like whirlwind. He's just like zooming around, speeding from one thing to the next, and like maybe leaving some kind of wreckage in his path, and she crosses over that wreckage all the time, and he's already gone, but she's kind of left with like the disaster that he's like left in his wake. It's almost like all she's left with is the aftermath of him. And I also think that this is a cool tie back into when she was speaking about the goddess of timing, because she's like crossing his like jet stream, but I get that as to be the impression like it's not quite him, it's just like the gust that he leaves behind him that she's crossing through. So I think the tie back to the goddess of timing, again being like things have never quite aligned for her. She's almost like always just missed him. He's always been just out of reach for her. I also feel like we both did the best we could do underneath the same moon in different galaxies as a lyric that I am never going to emotionally recover from, to be quite honest. The first time I heard it, my jaw was literally on the floor, because it just perfectly describes your relationship with some people. It's like they both are maybe really trying the best they can with the tools that they've been given, and maybe she genuinely believes this, that she's like, okay, like I just have like a much bigger capacity for love than he does, and all I have to do is be patient and wait for him, and eventually when his frontal lobe has developed, then he will finally be the man and we can have the relationship that we've always wanted to have. We're both doing our very best underneath this same moon, but when it comes to where we actually are individually, we may as well be in entirely different galaxies. It's almost like she's been like, okay, he's not sticking to his word, but it's not really his fault. And this, again, I feel like this is something that, like, when you love somebody, like, you do tend to do. You tend to make excuse after excuse after excuse for them. So maybe this is what she's doing here as well. She's been like, yeah, well, he's not sticking to his promise, but like he really is trying his best, and like it's not his fault that he is the way he is. And I feel like that line could either be taken as like a genuine thing, maybe he is actually trying his best, or maybe it's her just making excuses for him. And I think that Wendy's always like to make excuses for the Peters in their life, where at the end of the day, if you're both fully functioning adults, you know, sometimes you do just need to grow up and you can't make excuses for somebody forever. And then again, like the image of like being under the same moon is like, well, I'm here doing it. Like I'm doing the thing. Why can't you do it? But really, like, they're like worlds apart when it comes to who they are, like, as a person and what they're emotionally capable of. Not even worlds apart, literal galaxies apart. Oh my god, and like, don't even speak to me about this bridge, honestly. And I won't confess that I waited, but I let the lamp burn as the men masqueraded. I hoped you'd return. At first I thought I won't confess that I waited was a pride thing. Like maybe she was like, I'm not going to confess that I waited all these years for you. But after approximately 200,000 listens, I actually think I see that line as meaning something slightly different. So I think when you tie that into, I won't confess that I waited, but I let the lamp burn as the men masqueraded. I hoped you'd return. And if you kind of take all that as like a chunk instead of just looking at it as like individual lines, it can mean something else. So I think she's saying, like, I won't confess that I waited because I can't confess that to you, because in some degree that's not true, because I have had other relationships, I have seen other men, I have been with other people, maybe I have had other loves, but I have had this little lamp of hope waiting for you. Like, I've still had this flame burning for you. And that's why I take as the men masqueraded, it's almost as if like they are just like this stand-in for Peter. Like, they are just somebody who she's with to kind of pass the time with, and almost like her consolation prize until she can actually get to be Peter. They're just there, but in the back of her mind, maybe she can't ever fully commit to these people, because she knows that her one true love is Peter, and that is the person that she ultimately is truly, truly waiting for. But let me know what you think about those lines. With your feet on the ground, tell me all that you'd learned, 'cause love's never lost when perspective is earned. And oh my fucking god, is this painful or what? Because like the whole time she's been waiting for him to come back and say, okay, I'm ready now, I've learned so much about myself, I've bettered myself so much, I'm a completely different person now. We needed that time apart so that like we could truly be together in the best way, and I could be what was best for you. And if he had done that, she wouldn't have viewed all these years where she just waited for him as wasted time, because that love wouldn't have been lost, because perspective would have been earned. But he's never done that, so all that love then is lost, and all those years that she's just like waited for him and waited for him were ultimately all for absolutely nothing. The love wouldn't have been lost because he's been away getting some perspective, so that when he can come back to her, he can love her right in the way that he promised that he would love her. But he isn't going to come back with his feet on the ground. He's staying flying around, keeping himself a little lost boy. My camera cut out and I really have no idea where, so I'm going to be really fucking pissed if it cut out a big chunk of that, but hopefully it didn't. And you said you'd come and get me, but you were 25 and the shelf life of those fantasies has expired. Lost to the Lost Boys chapter of your life. So it's like the more time passes and the older she gets and the older he gets, she's realising that all her hopes were literally just fantasies and there was no reality in them at all. He was never really going to grow up. He was never really going to come back and find her. It's that heartbreak of like all the things that I had held out hope for so long, and all these dreams I had had, and my vision of the future, like everything I ever wanted is never ever going to happen. And she can't fantasize about it anymore because she knows that ultimately she's came to the realisation that he will always choose himself, and he will always choose his Lost Boys chapter over her. It's what he's been continuing to do for years, and it is what he will continue to do forever. And if she waits any longer, she will waste the rest of her life waiting. Forgive me, Peter. Please know that I tried to hold on to the days when you were mine, but the woman who sits by the window has turned out the light. Oh, my cat's gone mental. After knowing the whole story through the song, her ending again with "Forgive me, Peter" is particularly heartbreaking, because to know that she's not really done anything wrong in this situation, and she has been like loyal to somebody through and through who probably like didn't even deserve it and was potentially not even giving her a second thought, and she still feels the weight of this guilt for actually moving on with her life and actually letting go something he has been doing for a really, really long time. It's just so sad. Like, she's waited for him for so long without like even a sign that like he's trying, and she's in so much pain, and she gets to a point where she can't be in pain like that anymore, and she knows that her and him are never ever really going to be, and she has to let go. But at the end of the day, she's still having to hold on to the weight of all this guilt. So even though she can like let go, it's almost like she's still wanting permission from him that it's going to be okay to let go. She's like, forgive me, Peter, will you forgive me? Are you going to forgive me if I like don't just wait for you indefinitely? And again, I think that also goes back into the lost fearless leader and the Peter was she lying, the idea that she relies so heavily on this person. He never came back. He had the opportunity to come back for her. He chose not to. She waited around for this boy who, purposefully or not purposefully, kind of broke her, and like, oh my god! You're actually a crazy bitch. Anytime I have this camera out, she just does not like it. Bikini, you alright? Yeah, she's remaining sorry to this little boy who doesn't deserve her apology, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to why I think Peter fits into the love triangle and why I believe that Peter is James and the narrator of Peter is Betty. So I do have notes for this bit, which is great because I just took like an hour filming that first half, and I thought, oh, it'll take like an hour to film the whole thing, but I guess I just had a lot to say. So brief overview if you don't know this, but I'm sure that you probably do know this. In the Folklore album, there are 3 songs that tell the story of a love triangle, with each person in the love triangle having a song. So we have Cardigan, where Betty sings about her relationship with James and how their relationship came to an end because he chased 2 girls and lost the one. But it's kind of written from the perspective of Betty looking back on her teenage love and kind of remembering the hurt and pain that James had caused her. And then we have August, where Augustine talks about falling in love with a boy that she's seeing, which comes to an end because he ultimately wasn't hers to lose. And then in Betty, James talks about his regret for having cheated on Betty with Augustine and says that it was just a summer thing, and he shows up at Betty's house to ask for one more chance at rekindling their relationship. Taylor has said before, I believe, that in her mind, Betty and James do resolve things and they do end up together and they grow old together and they're living like a happy little folklore dream, and I love that for them. But I'm just here to offer a little alternative ending because who doesn't love a little bit of chaos? So the first thing that kind of makes it fit in well is all 3 songs talk about how young they were when this happened. So there's mentions of being at school in the songs, and there is when you're young, they assume you know nothing. It's very clear that these people are very young, and James also says in Betty that he's 17 years old. I seen somebody saying, what if Peter is from the perspective of Augustine speaking about James? What if James and Betty did get together and Augustine was like thinking about James all the time and thinking he would come back for her? I don't really believe that, because I think I believe that James and Augustine really were just like a summer thing, and I don't believe he made her any like promises that he was going to come back for her. Even in August, she's singing about how he wasn't hers to lose, and I think August is like a closure of a relationship that she doesn't have any hope will rekindle. So that's why I think that Peter is Betty singing to James. What about James? Let's first of all talk about my evidence from Cardigan. I actually have like notes here, okay? In Cardigan, Betty says, "But I knew you playing hide and seek and giving me your weekends. And to me, that gives the same vibe as, it's not the same, but it gives the same vibe as in closets like cedar, preserved from when we were just kids. Like they have all these preserved memories of the times that they were young, and that's how she knew him, and that is how he will stay for her in her memory. The line "I knew you" is also one that is repeated in Cardigan often, and I think that's again a theme in Peter. So she's like, I knew you playing hide and seek, I knew you dancing in your Levi's. She's repeating this, but I knew you over and over again in Cardigan. And then in Peter, she's repeating the, you said you were going to grow up and then you were going to come find me. This gives to me that she holds on to this hope that no matter if James/Peter wrongs her, she's still holding on to the thought of like, no, I know you, like I know, like if you like if you make these promises to me, you'll keep them. It's almost like holding on to that. I know you so well. I know that our relationship was so deep and so meaningful that nothing that's currently happening actually matters, because I know you, I know the real you, and I know you will come back and find me. Oh, my neighbours are having a party right outside my door. Excellent. That'll give nice ambience. Okay, I've closed my living room door, so that might stop the noise, but it also might start Bikini screaming blue murder, because honestly, if you close a door in this house, you would actually think that somebody was trying to kill her. And then, I knew you tried to change the ending. Peter losing Wendy. I knew you leaving like a feather, running like water. I mean, of course, Betty here literally references them as Peter and Wendy, and there is an acknowledgement there that James does try and change the ending of Peter losing Wendy. So maybe him trying to change this ending as being like, I will grow up, I will change, I will come back for you. Ultimately, it's just words from the mouths of babes, and the promises are oceans deep, but never to keep, because he's running like water. Also, can I just say, leaving like a feather is such an iconic line. Every time I hear it, I'm always like, oh shit. It's also interesting here how she says, but I knew you'd linger like a tattoo kiss. I knew you'd haunt all over my what ifs. The smell of smoke would hang around this long, because I knew everything when I was young. Which is, of course, so themed with like waiting, lingering, she can't let go. She knew everything when she was young, and that like keeps her clinging on to that hope of the past. I knew I'd curse you for the longest time, chasing shadows in the grocery line. And I feel like this is like such a mirror to, as the men masqueraded, I hoped you'd return. Like, all the men that she encounters are someone who like could be him, and like the way that she like looks for him everywhere she goes. Almost like and is it over now? Is that where she says, I see your profile and you're smiling unsuspecting waiters? And then also in Torch of Poets, when she talks about looking in people's windows, and that kind of like, oh my god, is that him? Is that him? Is that him? Oh my god, what if I look in people's windows was from the perspective of like James, because he's like Peter Pan? Oh! Wait, oh my god, what if it actually was, what if he did try and go back for her, but like he like couldn't find her, and he's like looking in people's windows all the time, like hoping that her eyes will like look up and meet his one more time? Oh my god. I shouldn't be allowed to say that. I should not have been allowed to say that. I should not have been allowed to think that. Anyway, fuck. Also, chasing shadows in the grocery line. Chasing shadows is so Peter Pan coded, because part of the Peter Pan lore is Peter Pan loses his shadow all the time, and Wendy stitches his shadow back on for him. I knew you'd miss me once the thrill expired, and you'd be standing in my front porch light. And like, it actually does kill me to compare this to, but the woman who sits by the window has turned out the light. I personally think that if we are putting this this alternative ending as our narrative, then Cardigan Betty is still a little bit in her like Delulu era, that everything is like going to be okay. And her knowing that he'd be there standing in her front porch light was like it was just kind of like a fantasy of hers. And I feel like obviously Cardigan is still written from a future perspective, but I think like it's when Betty's looking back, she's reminiscing on how she felt at the time, and she's like, yeah, I knew you'd come back for me, not necessarily because he actually did, but because she just had that like feeling like in her ribs where it was like, of course he'll come back for me, like of course he will, he loves me. Oh my god. Anyway, let's talk about Betty and Peter. So throughout the entirety of Betty, James is really showing his immaturity. He's saying a lot of things that like come off as just a 17-year-old boy, which he is. He's not got like a high level of like admitting when he's done wrong or being mature enough to actually apologise and take full responsibility for what he's done. So there's loads of little things like throughout that. First of all, he has like snarky marks about Inez where he's like, oh, you can't believe a word she says, well, like most times, but this time it was true. And he blames everything on Augustine pretty much and takes no accountability. And he's also like, yeah, I like showed up at that event and you were like dancing with him, so like that's like kind of why I done it. And then he is also like, I'm only 17, I don't know anything, like I'm just a little boy. While I was thinking this, I know I just had a revelation moments ago about I look in people's windows, but when I was scripting this, I actually had a really fucked up revelation about Augustine as well. You know, obviously like James has like very like slut shamey undertones when he's been like, I was literally just like walking home on broken cobblestones, like, you know, I was just like being like an innocent young boy where like she like swoops on in like a figment of my worst intentions and she's like, James, get in, let's drive, almost being like this like wicked temptress. What if Augustine is the albatross? What if Augustine is the albatross? What if Augustine is the albatross? I actually have so many things to say about the albatross as well, because I feel like that is one that again is very, very underrated, and it is absolutely genius. And I feel like I have got to a point where I have like entirely like absorbed the albatross, and I do understand it for the greatness that it is. So I feel like I could definitely make a video on the albatross and then maybe put in some ties to Augustine as well. But in this theory where the albatross is from Augustine's point of view, at the end of the albatross where she's like, the devil that you knew now looks more like an angel, I swooped in at the rescue, that's where I think like Augustine and Betty have like their moment and actually are just like, hey, this boy ain't shit. Like, it's been years, maybe they like bump into each other years later. Maybe Betty, when she was younger, because she was probably only 17 at the time, was like, yeah, fuck that slut. Yeah, she's better known for the things that she does on the mattress anyway. But now she's like a grown, mature woman. She's like, oh, it was actually James that was in the wrong, and he also wronged you as well. Let's be friends. What if Augustine is the albatross? I am literally so fucked up with the things that I'm saying today. Anyway, James is 17, and you can assume that Augustine and Betty are like a similar age to him. And lyrically, these songs are so great, because what Taylor has done is, Betty, by the way, is actually one of my like, probably my like in my top 10 favourite Taylor Swift songs of all time. So I'm not saying that it's not good lyrically. What I'm saying is it's fucking great lyrically, because like she's worded things in such a way that make it seem like a 17-year-old boy would say it. Like, whereas August and Cardigan come off as a little bit more mature, Betty is written And he says things like, oh, it was just a summer thing, like making it seem like so flippant and all your stupid friends. Like, he says very teenage boy things, and I just think this is fucking genius of this love triangle to make all, like, Taylor wrote all of these songs and they all have different personalities. That's insane. She's wild. Anyway, I just thought that was super interesting to just like add how, again, like the maturity is even reflected in the folklore songs, I guess, as well, when maturity is like such a huge theme in Peter. And then Betty, I'm here on your doorstep and I planned it out for weeks now, but it's finally sinking in. Betty, right now is the last time I can dream about what happens when you see my face again. And then I believe as James stood on her doorstep, he lets himself go off into a fantasy of what could happen. And that's when he goes into the only thing I wanna do is make it up to you, but actually inching. So I showed up at your party. Yeah, showed up at your party. Will you have me? Will you love me? Will you kiss me on the porch in front of all your stupid friends? If you kiss me, will it be just like I dreamed it? Again, he himself has this dream of showing up to the porch just like Betty did. But he also has all these questions, including like, if you kiss me, will it be just like I dreamed it? He doesn't say he gets to kiss her. He doesn't say like, it doesn't say if he ever finds out if she will have him and love him and kiss him on the porch. It's all like, it's all fantasy. Will it patch your broken wings? I'm only 17. I don't know anything, but I know I miss you. And the broken wings, I think, directly links back to being able to fly, of course, like as Peter can do. But she's on the ground now, and in Peter, she said, well, I didn't want to come down, but she still did come down, grounded into reality. She also says that she hoped that Peter or James would return to her with his feet on the ground. And almost like if you compare them both together, he's like, will it patch your broken wings? Like, you're down there, like, come up and like join me. And she's being like, no, you come down here and be like grounded in reality and maturity with me. But he still has that level of immaturity where he's like, oh, maybe if I like kiss you and like say sorry, it'll patch your broken wings, and then you'll like come up here and like fly again, because I'm not coming down anytime soon. Literally, they are under the same moon, but they are in completely different galaxies. Standing in your cardigan, kissing in my car again, stopped at a streetlight, you know I miss you. So James ends this with, you know I miss you. He did not say, you know I have missed you, you know I've missed you, like as if like that's like their like union when they finally get together. And he's like, you know I've missed you. It's like, you know I miss you, like kind of tells me that they didn't get back together. Like, he's still missing her, so he's not telling her I have missed you. He's like almost stuff like, you know I miss you, right? Like, they didn't get back together. Maybe he got to her porch, maybe he fantasized about all the things that could happen, and then ultimately chickened out and turned back around. So, to summarise my findings. Betty and James met when they were 17 and fell madly in love, kissing in cars, dancing in Levi's and being drunk under streetlights. James fucks up massively and cheats on Betty with Augustine, who he would later disregard as just a summer thing. He blames her for everything with very slut-shamey undertones. Maybe Augustine is or isn't the albatross, and maybe Augustine tried to warn Betty of like, hey, James just like threw me away like I was absolutely nothing. Like, I don't think he's like a very good guy. And Betty in her own youth wouldn't take that on board, and she was also just so blinded by her love for James and wanting them to like eventually one day be able to rekindle when he was mature enough, that she didn't listen to Augustine, and she almost maybe like slut shamed her as well, and was like, no, like, you're the albatross, get the fuck away from me. But then several years later, when Betty finally matured and grew up, then she looked back on the situation and she's like, wow, Augustine was like massively played as well. The devil that I knew now looks more like an angel who tried to like warn me about James. I am honestly so fucked up by this. Like, I actually have to like deep dive it. If you watch this and you want me to do like a whole like albatross video, please do let me know. Anyway, James decides that he wants Betty back because it's Betty that he truly loves, but in the end he doesn't have the courage or the maturity to actually follow through and change enough to win her over. He gets to the porch, he dreams about what could potentially be, but he gets scared and he leaves. Maybe at some point he does tell her, when we are older, we are going to find a way back to each other. We are going to be able to, we are soulmates, we are destined for each other. All you just have to do is just give me a little bit of time. But right now, I don't think this can be. Betty holds on to her lost love for years, and in Cardigan, she reflects still through the lens of slight delusion that he will come back to her, looking at them as Peter and Wendy with a different ending. Then sometime after that, she finally turns out the porch light because she knows that he will never return to her and that she has lost him to the Lost Boys chapter of his life. And potentially this whole time he's looking in people's windows for her because he's fucking Peter Pan and he's like looking in everybody's windows to see if Wendy's there. My mind, honestly, am I Taylor Swift? Am I as genius as Taylor Swift? I actually might be. Like, how funny would it be if, like, everybody watching this is like, bitch, like, none of what you says literally made, like, any sense. And it might not. And I'm not saying that's, like, true. I just think it's really fun to play with the songs and be like, okay, oh, what if this fits in here, and what if that fits in there, and what if this is from this character's perspective. And I think that's why Folklore was such a great album, because like you can relate it back to other songs that might be autobiographical for Taylor, maybe, but I think it's also fun to look at these characters she's built and this whole like world that she's built and see if that can be expanded on a little bit. Taylor, if you're watching, let me know if I was right about anything. Also, Eras Tour was the best night of my whole life. I love you so much, and I would fly anywhere in the world if you wanted to get like a coffee or something like that. Anyway, that is all I have for this video. I just think it's so hilarious how I was like, oh yeah, I'll get this whole thing done in like an hour, and it's been an hour and 45 minutes that I've been sat here. This is going to be a nightmare to edit, but it's worth it. I had fun. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your opinions, and until next time, bye.